Welcome to the Raw Files. Behind every closed door, there's a secret. Behind every silent face, there's a story the world wasn't meant to hear. Today, we peel back the layers of a case that defies logic and challenges the very core of human nature. Stay tuned, because the truth is never as simple as it seems. What you are about to hear are true stories, gathered from the darkest corners of the globe. Some of these cases have been closed, their mysteries tucked away in dusty archives. Others remain chillingly unsolved, leaving behind questions that time refuses to answer. But then, there are those cases where the official verdict just doesn't sit right, leaving us to wonder if justice was truly served, or if the real truth is still out there, hiding in plain sight. Today, we step into the shadows to peel back the layers of these enigmas. If you have a thirst for the truth, make sure to subscribe and join us for the journey ahead. Now, let's open the files. February 2016. Chinese New Year is approaching. An uncle waits at a railway station in Fujian province, scanning the crowd for two familiar faces. His nephew had sent a message days earlier. Returning from Boston, arriving February 6th. Please pick us up at the station. The nephew is a prodigy, a straight-A student at Peking University, China's most prestigious institution, ranked #1 in Asia. The kind of young man every parent dreams of raising. His mother is a respected teacher, dignified, independent. The kind of woman who once refused financial help from her school, insisting she would raise her son on her own after her husband's early death. The uncle waits. Trains arrive. Passengers flood the platform. Hours pass. They never appear. He calls the nephew's phone. No answer. He calls the mother's phone. Silence. A week goes by. The uncle's worry deepens into dread. He makes a decision. February 14th, 2016. Valentine's Day. A day that would reveal anything but love. The uncle's persistence had finally brought him to the faculty apartment complex on Jishan Road in Fuzhou's Jinan district. When building management and police arrived to open the locked door, they entered what appeared to be an abandoned residence. But appearances were deceiving. The forensic team noticed immediately. Every gap, every crack, every possible opening in the apartment had been sealed with tape. Windows, door frames, ventilation spaces, as if someone had tried to create an airtight chamber. Then they saw the bed. What lay on it resembled a large, carefully wrapped package. As investigators began to remove the layers, a pattern emerged. Plastic sheeting, activated carbon powder, plastic sheeting, activated carbon, layer after layer after layer, nearly 100 times. The activated carbon was not random. It was methodical, designed specifically to absorb the smell of decomposition, to prevent neighbors from detecting what lay inside. When they finally reached the center, they found Xie Tianqin. The forensic pathologist's preliminary examination revealed she had been dead approximately 8 months. Cause of death: severe head trauma from a blunt object. Her skull had been fractured, but there was more. Near the front door, investigators discovered infrared sensors, motion detectors linked to a remote monitoring system. Someone had installed equipment to know if anyone entered this apartment, to track, from afar, whether the body had been discovered. and there were vacuum-sealed bags scattered throughout, the kind used for long-term storage, the kind purchased in bulk. The questions multiplied faster than answers. Who had wrapped this woman in 100 layers of plastic? Who had calculated that activated carbon would mask decomposition? Who had installed surveillance to monitor the crime scene from a distance? And where was Wu Xieyu, her 21-year-old son? The case landed on the desk of Fuzhou's Criminal Investigation Bureau like a bomb. A respected teacher, murdered in her own home, her body hidden with such methodical precision that neighbors living meters away had detected nothing for 8 months. And her son, a student at China's most elite university, vanished without a trace. Detective teams divided into 2 immediate priorities: victimology and suspect identification. Xie Tianqin's colleagues painted a consistent picture. She was dedicated, principled. When her husband died young, leaving her to raise their son alone, the school had offered financial assistance. She refused it. "I will raise him myself," she'd said. "I'll make sure he succeeds." And succeed he had. Her son Wu Xieyu was not just intelligent, he was extraordinary. Perfect grades from elementary school through university. Admitted to Peking University without taking entrance exams. Scholarships, awards, accolades. Every parent's dream child. But something didn't fit. In July 2015, Xie Tianqin had suddenly announced to friends and colleagues that she and her son would be moving to America. He'd been accepted to study abroad. She would accompany him to help him settle in. Around the same time, several of her friends received text messages asking to borrow money. The amounts varied, but the reason was always the same: study abroad expenses for her son. Could they help? It was unusual. Xie Tianqin had always been fiercely independent, but for her son's education? That was different. That was worth swallowing pride. Friends and relatives contributed. Some sent thousands of yuan, others tens of thousands. The total reached 1.4 million yuan, roughly $200,000. In August 2015, the school received a formal resignation letter from Xie Tianqin. The handwriting looked authentic. The signature matched. She was leaving her position to support her son's education in America. But Xie Tianqin had never left Fuzhou. She had died in July 2015, just as those text messages were being sent. Detectives began pulling security camera footage from stores near the apartment. They were looking for anyone who had purchased unusual quantities of specific items: plastic sheeting, activated carbon, vacuum seal bags, tools. The search took weeks, but eventually they found it. June 2015, 1 month before Xie Tianqin's death, a young man entered a hardware store and purchased an unusually large quantity of supplies: multiple rolls of industrial plastic wrap, several bags of activated carbon, a hammer, scissors, vacuum seal bags. The face on the security footage was clear. Wu Xieyu. The interrogation of absence. The investigation now faced a unique challenge. Their primary suspect had vanished. They couldn't interrogate him. They couldn't pressure him. They could only build a case from evidence and wait. Detectives interviewed Wu Xieyu's university classmates, professors, and friends. The portrait they painted was maddeningly perfect. He was brilliant, always the top student. He was friendly, outgoing, not awkward at all like some academic types. He greeted everyone, professors, janitors. He was respectful to everyone. If there was a competition, he won it. If there was a scholarship, he got it. How could someone so accomplished, so admired, so apparently well-adjusted, commit matricide? One friend mentioned something odd. Xieyu had occasionally brought up suicide in conversation, but when pressed, he'd laugh it off as a joke. Dark humor, nothing more. But it wasn't nothing. Forensic accountants traced the borrowed money. The 1.4 million yuan had moved through several accounts, but it all originated with Xie Tianqin's phone, which Xieyu had controlled after her death. Bank records showed systematic withdrawals. The money was being spent. But on what? Hotels, restaurants, entertainment venues, and most disturbingly, multiple fake identity documents. Xieyu had been living under dozens of assumed names, traveling across China, staying in cheap hotels, working odd jobs under false identities. He'd essentially become a ghost within his own country. In March 2016, Fuzhou police issued a nationwide arrest warrant for Xieyu. His photo appeared on wanted posters across China. A reward of 10,000 yuan was offered for information leading to his capture. When 2 months passed with no credible leads, the reward was increased to 50,000 yuan. But Xieyu remained invisible. Many began to speculate he was already dead. That guilt had driven him to suicide, that his body lay undiscovered somewhere, and the case would never truly close. The police didn't believe it. The fake IDs suggested a plan. The surveillance equipment suggested calculation. This wasn't a man who'd acted in passion and fled in panic. This was someone who had prepared, and preparation meant intention to survive. April 21st, 2019. 3 years after the manhunt began. Chongqing, Jiangbei International Airport. Security cameras flagged a face in the crowd. Facial recognition software pinged an alert. Officers moved in quietly, surrounding a young man waiting in the departure lounge. He had more than 30 fake identity documents on him. Different names, different provinces, different backgrounds, an entire portfolio of fictional lives. But the face was unmistakable. Xieyu, the genius, the fugitive, the son who had wrapped his mother in 100 layers of plastic. In the interrogation room, he was calm, almost detached, as if discussing someone else's crime. He confessed immediately. There was no point in denial. The evidence was overwhelming. The body, the supplies, the fake IDs, the borrowed money. But his confession raised more questions than it answered. "I killed my mother with a dumbbell," he said, on July 10th, 2015. "She wasn't paying attention. I struck the back of her head. She died instantly." Detectives asked why. Why would a son kill the mother who had sacrificed everything for him? His answer was chilling in its simplicity. "I wanted to be free." He described the planning, how he'd researched methods online, how he'd known that blunt force trauma would be quick and certain, how he'd calculated that wrapping the body in plastic with activated carbon would prevent detection. He admitted to writing the resignation letter, carefully studying his mother's handwriting from old teaching documents, cutting out characters, reassembling them to form the resignation text, then copying it by hand until it looked authentic. He admitted to sending the text messages borrowing money, using his mother's phone, mimicking her communication style. He admitted to installing the surveillance equipment, checking it remotely for months to see if the body had been discovered. And he admitted that his plan included one more step. "I was going to commit suicide after," he said. "That was always the plan. Kill my mother. then kill myself. We would both be free. But when the moment came, when his mother lay dead and wrapped on the bed, he couldn't do it. I didn't have the courage, he said. So I took the money and ran. One detective asked the question that had haunted everyone. Why did you send that message to your uncle? The one asking him to pick you up at the train station. You knew your mother was dead. You knew you wouldn't be there. Why set up that meeting? Xieyu was silent for a long moment. So someone would find her, he finally said. I didn't want her body to stay there forever. She deserved better than that. It was the only moment during the entire confession that he showed anything resembling emotion. The murder of Xie Tianqin was not an impulsive act. It was not a moment of rage or a loss of control. It was architecture. Xieyu had been planning for months. In early 2015, Xieyu began researching murder methods online. He studied anatomy. He read about causes of death. He learned that blunt force trauma to the skull was among the most reliably fatal methods. Quick, certain, requiring no specialized tools. He researched decomposition. He learned that bodies produce distinctive odors as they break down. He discovered that activated carbon could absorb these odors effectively if used in sufficient quantity. He studied police investigation techniques. He learned about forensic evidence. He understood that the more layers of protection he placed around the body, the longer it would take investigators to extract usable DNA or fingerprints. June 2015, 1 month before the murder. Xieyu visited hardware stores and purchased supplies, not all at once, not from a single location. He spread his purchases across multiple shops to avoid suspicion. Industrial plastic sheeting, dozens of meters, activated carbon, multiple large bags, a hammer, scissors, tape, vacuum seal bags for storage. He also acquired motion sensor equipment, infrared detectors that could alert a remote device when someone entered the apartment. Xieyu understood that to disappear in modern China required more than just leaving. It required becoming someone else, multiple someone else's, through underground channels, the details of which he never fully disclosed. He obtained dozens of fake identity cards, each with a different name, each with documentation solid enough to pass casual inspection at hotels, train stations, and employment offices. He created backup financial accounts under false names. He established a network of aliases he could rotate through, never staying anywhere long enough to be memorable. The study abroad narrative was brilliant in its simplicity. It explained a sudden departure. It justified borrowing money. It created a plausible reason why both mother and son would be unreachable for an extended period. To understand how Xieyu became capable of murdering his mother, you must first understand what it means to be perfect. Xieyu was born in 1994 in Fujian province. His father died when he was young. The exact circumstances were never publicly detailed, but it left his mother, Xie Tianqin, as a widow, raising a son alone on a teacher's salary. From his earliest school years, Xieyu was exceptional. Perfect grades, top of his class. Teachers described him as a once-in-a-generation student. His classmates gave him a nickname, Shen, Wu the God. It started as admiration. Over time, it became expectation. Xie Tianqin was intensely proud of her son. She was also intensely controlling. Every night they talked, long conversations about his day, his studies, his future. To an outsider, It looked like devoted parenting, a mother deeply involved in her son's life. But Wu Xieyu experienced it differently. Every conversation was an interrogation, he later told psychologists. She wasn't asking about my day. She was checking whether I'd deviated from the path she'd planned for me. The path was clear. Be the best. Not just good. Not just excellent. The absolute best. First in the class, winner of every competition, recipient of every scholarship. Each achievement unlocked the next expectation. Each success raised the bar higher. There was no plateau, no point at which he could rest and say, "I've done enough." There was only upward. Always upward. Xie Tianqin was herself high-achieving. She was the only person in her extended family to pursue higher education. She'd become a respected teacher through discipline and hard work. She wanted her son to surpass even her accomplishments. And he did. Spectacularly. But there was a darker side to her parenting that emerged during the investigation. Friends and relatives recalled that Xie Tianqin had very specific rules for Wu Xieyu. One in particular stood out. She refused to discuss anything related to sexuality. If Wu Xieyu, even as a teenager, asked questions or made casual comments about dating, attraction, or physical development, his mother would shut down the conversation immediately, sometimes with anger, sometimes with disappointment, always with the message that such topics were inappropriate, shameful, and beneath someone of his caliber. Several psychologists who examined Wu Xieyu after his arrest identified this as a critical factor. Sexual development is a normal part of adolescence, one expert noted. When that development is treated as shameful or forbidden, it doesn't disappear. It becomes repressed, and repression creates internal pressure. Wu Xieyu was not allowed to have normal teenage friendships. He was discouraged from dating. Any interest in romance was seen as a distraction from academics. His mother believed she was protecting him, keeping him focused, ensuring his success. But she was also creating a pressure cooker with no release valve. On the surface, Wu Xieyu thrived. He gained admission to Peking University, the pinnacle of Chinese higher education. He won scholarships. He excelled in every measurable way. His professors described him as not just brilliant, but well-rounded. He wasn't socially awkward. He wasn't isolated. He greeted people warmly. He participated in campus activities. He seemed happy. But several friends later mentioned something that, in retrospect, was a warning sign. Wu Xieyu occasionally talked about suicide. Not seriously, they thought. Just dark humor. Philosophical musings about the value of life. He'd say things like, "What's the point of all this?" Or, "Sometimes I wonder if it's worth continuing," one classmate recalled. But then he'd laugh and change the subject. We thought he was just being dramatic. He wasn't being dramatic. He was testing whether anyone would take him seriously, whether anyone would recognize that behind the perfect grades and warm smile was someone drowning. No one did. The legal proceedings in Wu Xieyu's case were closely watched throughout China. This was not a typical murder. This was matricide committed by someone society had celebrated as exemplary. The trial began in 2020. Wu Xieyu was charged with intentional homicide, one of the most serious crimes under Chinese law, carrying a possible death sentence. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. The physical evidence alone was damning. The body wrapped in nearly 100 layers, the activated carbon, the surveillance equipment, the fake IDs, the borrowed money spent frivolously while Xie Tianqin's corpse lay in her apartment. Wu Xieyu had admitted everything. Wu Xieyu's defense team didn't try to argue innocence. They couldn't. Instead, they focused on mitigation. They brought in psychological experts who testified that Wu Xieyu exhibited signs of severe mental disturbance, not legal insanity. He clearly understood right from wrong and had planned the murder methodically. But psychological damage from years of extreme pressure and emotional repression. Several psychologists diagnosed him with conditions related to perfectionism, identity suppression, and emotional dysregulation. The defense also highlighted Wu Xieyu's stated original intention to commit suicide after killing his mother. They argued this showed he hadn't planned to benefit from the crime, that his motivation wasn't greed or inheritance, but a distorted concept of liberation. Perhaps most surprisingly, members of Xie Tianqin's extended family spoke on Wu Xieyu's behalf. Uncles, aunts, and cousins testified that they believed Wu Xieyu had been psychologically damaged by circumstances beyond his control. They asked for leniency, not acquittal, not freedom, but life imprisonment instead of execution. He was our family too, one aunt said in court. Tianqin would not have wanted her son executed. Despite everything, she loved him. It was a remarkable statement. The victim's own family asking mercy for her killer. There are no heroes in this story, only victims. Xie Tianqin is a victim of her son's violence, yes, but she was also, in some sense, a victim of her own love that manifested as control, as expectation, as pressure that admitted no release. Wu Xieyu is a victim too, though he is also a murderer. A victim of expectations he could never escape, of an identity he never chose, of a pressure that built until something inside him broke catastrophically. The friends and family who lent money are victims of deception and betrayal, and Chinese society itself grappled with being a victim of its own values, achievement above all, success at any cost, excellence as the only acceptable path. And remember the lesson written in their tragedy. Excellence is admirable, but humanity is essential. Perfection is impossible, but acceptance is always possible. And love, true love, must have room for failure. Without that room, love becomes something else entirely. Something that destroys